In part one, Mildred Okafor, a virgin raised by her dying uncle, a former pastor, worked secretly at Club Deluxe to pay for his cancer treatments, lying that she worked at a hospital, until Jae Hakim, a bored Korean mafia heir, noticed her innocence and decided to corrupt it, giving her 3 weeks before she'd be his. He awakened dark desires in her through psychological seduction with no strings attached, then gave her a hotel key card and an ultimatum. Meet him at midnight for 3 days together or never see him again. In part two, Mildred decided to meet Jae-ha at the hotel, but had a confrontation with Uncle Desmond the same night that led him to the hospital, making her miss the midnight deadline completely. 1 week later, consumed by desire and desperate to explain, she returned to Jae-ha's penthouse where he did things to her she had never experienced. Then he sent her home aching, wanting more and humiliated, only for her to arrive and find Uncle Desmond waiting with a devastating ultimatum. Choose righteousness and stay under his roof, or continue down this sinful path and leave his house forever. She had until sunrise to decide between the only family she'd ever known and the dark desires she could no longer deny. What will she decide? Welcome to part 3, my lovelies. If you've been with us since part 1, you already know this story doesn't pull punches. You've watched Mildred fall from grace. You've seen Jaeha's walls crack. You felt every moment of tension, every heartbreak, every forbidden touch that led us here. And if you thought parts 1 and 2 were intense, buckle up, because part 3 is where everything comes to a head. New viewers, stop. I'm serious. Click the links in the description and watch parts 1 and 2 right now. This is the finale. And if you don't know how a virgin club worker and a ruthless mafia heir got to this moment of total destruction and desperate longing, you will be completely and utterly lost. Trust me, you need the full context of their twisted, beautiful, devastating journey. And everyone, returning fans and newcomers alike, do me a favor. Hit that like button, smash subscribe, and turn on those notifications. Because what you're about to witness is a story about redemption, transformation, sacrifice, and a love so powerful it forces two broken people to become whole. This is it. The moment where Mildred chooses herself, where Jae-ha learns what it means to be vulnerable, where faith and desire stop being enemies and start being partners, where falling apart becomes the only way to fall together. Part 3. The choice that changes everything. The transformation that costs everything. The love that saves everything. Are you ready? Let's finish this story the way it deserves to be told. Raw, honest, and absolutely unforgettable. Now let's dive in. The clock on the wall read 3:47 a.m., but Mildred had stopped counting the minutes an hour ago. The house was silent except for the ticking of that damned clock. Each second, a reminder that dawn was coming, and she still hadn't made her choice. Choose me or choose him. Uncle Desmond's ultimatum echoed in her mind, his voice breaking when he'd said it. The man who had taken her in when her parents died, who had taught her to pray before she could properly read, who had never asked her for anything except to be good, to be faithful, to be his. And now he was asking her to give up the one thing that made her feel alive. Mildred closed her eyes and the memories came flooding back, unbidden and relentless. She remembered the funeral, her parents' casket side by side, too permanent, too final. Uncle Desmond had taken her hand and never let go that he'd been her anchor, her salvation, her entire world. Every Sunday at church, every scripture memorized, every lesson about purity and righteousness. But then the other memories came, the ones that made her skin flush hot even in the cool darkness of the living room. Jaeha's hands on her body, not gentle like prayer but demanding, possessive. The way he looked at her that first night at Club Deluxe, like she was the only woman in a room full of beautiful people. The way he had grabbed her at the hotel, kissing her neck and grabbing her thighs. She'd never felt desire before Jae-ha. Hadn't known her body could ache like this, could want with such desperate intensity that it felt like drowning and flying all at once. He'd awakened something in her, something hungry and wild that had no place in Uncle Desmond's orderly world of morning prayers and evening scriptures. Mildred opened her eyes and stared at her reflection in the darkened window. Who was she? The good girl who knelt beside her bed every night? Or the woman who'd let a dangerous man trace his fingers down her spine and whispered, please, like it was a prayer of its own? The anger hit her suddenly, fierce and hot. She was angry at Jae-ha for walking into her life and shattering her carefully constructed peace, for making her want things she'd been taught were sinful. But she was angrier at herself for wanting him despite everything. The clock struck 4:30 a.m., and something inside her broke open. She couldn't do this anymore, couldn't keep pretending she was the girl Uncle Desmond had raised. That girl had died the moment Jaeha's lips touched her neck, and trying to resurrect her was killing whatever was left. Mildred stood on shaking legs and walked to the kitchen. She pulled out a piece of paper and a pen, and for a long moment, she just stared at the blank page. Then she began to write. Uncle Desmond, I'm so sorry. I know those words aren't enough, will never be enough, but they're all I have right now. You gave me everything. A home, a faith, a reason to keep living when I wanted to die with my parents. You never asked me for anything except to be the person you raised me to be. I can't be her anymore. I don't know if I ever really was. I'll keep sending money for your bills. I promise you won't struggle because of my choices. I'll check on you, but from a distance, because I know seeing me will only hurt you more. I have to find out who I really am. I'm sorry it's not who you wanted me to be. I love you. Always. Mildred. She folded the note with trembling hands and placed it on the kitchen table where he'd find it when he woke for morning prayer. Then she walked to her bedroom and packed a small bag, just the essentials, nothing sentimental. This wasn't a departure that deserved a ceremony. The taxi ride to the Sheila Hotel was a blur of tears and streetlights. By the time she arrived at the hotel, her eyes were swollen nearly shut. Her makeup streaked down her cheeks in ugly black rivers. Her heart felt like it had been shattered and poorly glued back together, all sharp edges and missing pieces. She used the key card Jeha had given her 3 weeks ago. Each floor that passed felt like another step away from salvation and closer to damnation. Or maybe it was the opposite. She didn't know anymore. The penthouse doors opened and she stepped inside. Jeha stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, silhouetted against the rising sun, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He must have heard the doors open because he turned, and that infuriating smirk was already spreading across his face. You were 1 week late, he said, his voice dripping with amusement. And now you're back too soon. Begging for more? The smirk died the instant he saw her face. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes, fury, pure and barely controlled. He crossed the room in seconds, his whiskey glass forgotten, and grabbed her shoulders with hands that trembled with rage. Who hurt you? His voice was deadly quiet, each word carefully measured like he was holding back violence. Who dared make you cry? Give me a name. Mildred looked up at him through tear-blurred vision and felt something hysterical bubble up in her chest. A laugh or a sob, she couldn't tell which. You, she choked out. You did this. His grip loosened slightly, confusion replacing fury. What are you talking about? And then it all came pouring out. The confrontation with Uncle Desmond, the ultimatum, the choice that had torn her apart all night. The words tumbled over each other, broken and raw, while Jeha stood frozen in front of her. You came into my life and ruined everything, she sobbed. I had peace. I had purpose. I knew who I was. And then you looked at me like I was worth something more than prayers and scriptures. You touched me like I was real, like I mattered. And now I've lost everything. My home, my family, my faith, all of it. For you. For this. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe, her chest heaving with sobs that felt like they were being ripped from somewhere deep inside her soul. Jeha's expression had transformed completely. The amusement was gone. The smirk vanished, replaced by something she'd never seen on his face before. He looked almost wounded. He moved closer, eliminating the space between their bodies until she could feel the heat radiating from him, could feel his heart pounding against hers. His hands came up to cup her face, thumbs gently wiping away tears that wouldn't stop falling. I'm sorry, he whispered, and it was the first time she'd ever heard him apologize for anything. The words hung between them, fragile and unexpected. Mildred looked up at him, seeing past the dangerous exterior to something vulnerable underneath, something that matched the broken pieces inside her. Unable to resist, or maybe no longer wanting to, his mouth found her neck. But this time it was different. This wasn't the calculated seduction of their first encounter, wasn't the practiced charm of a man who knew exactly how to make women fall. This was claiming, possessive, and desperate, like he needed to mark her as his before she disappeared again. His teeth grazed her pulse point, and she gasped, the sound raw in the quiet penthouse. Her hands clutched his shirt, pulling him closer instead of pushing him away. The grief and desire tangled together until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. She was drowning in him, and for once, she didn't want to be saved. Please, she heard herself beg, not even sure what she was asking for. Stop? Continue? Save me? Destroy me? Please what? His voice was rough against her skin, his breath hot on her neck. Please don't stop. Please. I need. The words caught in her throat. Say it. It was a command, soft but unyielding. I need you. The confession tore from her lips like a prayer to a dark god. God help me, I need you. He groaned, the sound primal and hungry, reverberating through both their bodies. I said 3 weeks. You came around on day 20. But even as he spoke, he was already lifting her and her legs wrapped around him instinctively, like her body had been made for this for him. His mouth claimed hers with an intensity that bordered on violence, tongues tangling, teeth clashing, every kiss tasting of desperation and whiskey and something that felt dangerously like need. He carried her toward the bedroom, never breaking contact, like separating from her would cause him physical pain. When he laid her on silk sheets she'd never gotten to feel before, her heart was racing so fast she thought it might explode. She craved him with an intensity that terrified her, wanted him with a hunger that made her earlier prayers feel like lies. His eyes, God, his eyes, were dark with a hunger that matched her own. He looked at her like she was something precious and profane all at once, something to worship and ruin in the same breath. He slowly stripped her, piece by piece, each removal of clothing deliberate torture. His hands traced every inch of newly exposed skin, learning her body like scripture, committing her to memory. She was trembling beneath his touch, trembling with want and fear and something too big to name. Jeha, please, she whispered, and wasn't sure if she was begging him to stop or to never stop. He removed his shirt, eyes never leaving her body, drinking in the sight of her laid bare before him. His hand moved to his belt, fingers working the leather. And then something in his expression changed. A wall slammed down behind his eyes, so suddenly it was like watching a door close in her face. He stepped back, his hands shaking as he rebuttoned his shirt with jerky, uncoordinated movements. Leave. The single word was cold, final, cutting through the heated air like a blade. Mildred, confused and exposed, and suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was, scrambled to cover herself with the silk sheets. What? What happened? What did I do wrong? He turned his back, couldn't even look at her. Get dressed. Now. Jeha, please, I don't understand, her voice cracked, tears threatening again. I said get dressed. The shout was sharp, almost violent in its intensity. She was crying again, fumbling with her clothes with fingers that wouldn't work properly. Shame burned through her worse than any desire had. Hot and corrosive. She'd given up everything, her home, her family, her faith, and he was throwing her away before he'd even finished unwrapping her. Did I not beg right? The words tasted bitter on her tongue. Is that it? I left everything for you. He called for his guards without turning around, his voice flat and emotionless. Take Miss Okafor to the Grand Hyatt. Presidential suite. Put it on my account. Jeha, please look at me. But he didn't. He stood there with his back to her, rigid as stone, while his guards entered and escorted her out. She could feel their pitying looks, their careful hands that were too gentle, like she was something fragile that had already broken. She cried the entire way to the other hotel, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. The sun was fully up now, soul awakening to a beautiful morning that felt like mockery. She'd fallen from grace, just like Uncle Desmond had warned her she would. Uncle Desmond woke at sunrise heavy in his heart, remembering the ultimatum he gave his niece the previous night. He had just come out of the room when he saw the note on the table. His hands trembled as he picked it up, recognizing Mildred's careful handwriting immediately. He read it once, then again, tears streaming down his weathered face and dripping onto the paper, smudging the ink. Uncle Desmond sat in his old armchair, the same one she'd sat in just hours ago, and held the note against his chest. His lips moved in prayer, the words coming automatically after a lifetime of speaking to God. Lord, protect her, he whispered, his voice breaking. Bring her back to you. And if you can, his breath hitched. Bring her back to me. He sat there as the sun climbed higher, accepting what he couldn't change, his heart breaking with every prayer. The presidential suite at the Grand Hyatt was obscenely beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, marble everything, a bed so large it could sleep four people comfortably. It was the kind of luxury Mildred had only seen in magazines, and it made her sick. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Swollen eyes, ruined makeup, lips still tender from kisses that had meant nothing. This was the girl who'd given up everything for a man who'd thrown her away before he'd even finished undressing her. She couldn't eat, though room service had brought enough food to feed a family. Couldn't sleep, couldn't stop replaying those final moments in her mind. The way Jeha had looked at her with such raw hunger, like he wanted to devour her whole. And then nothing, just cold dismissal and the humiliation of being escorted out like trash. She'd seen desire in his eyes, felt it in the way his hands shook when he touched her. So what had changed? What had she done wrong? The questions circled her mind like vultures, picking at the carcass of her self-worth. By noon, she'd made her decision. She grabbed her bag and marched to the front desk, chin high despite the shame burning in her chest. I'm checking out, she told the bewildered clerk. But Miss Okafor, the suite is paid for the entire week. I don't care. I'm not his charity case. Her voice was harder than she'd ever heard it. I'm not his whore. She walked out into Seoul with nowhere to go, no home to return to, and only the clothes on her back. But at least she was walking away from Jeha's money, away from the last shred of whatever sick game he'd been playing. The penthouse looked like a war zone. Shattered glass on the floors, whiskey and blood mixing in amber pools. Furniture lay overturned, cushions slashed, expensive art hanging crooked on the walls. In the center of the destruction stood Jeha, chest heaving, knuckles bleeding, eyes wild. His crew watched from the doorway. Nobody brave enough to enter. They'd seen their boss angry before, had seen him break bones and end lives without flinching. But they'd never seen him like this. Out of control. Unhinged. Taeyong finally stepped forward, hands raised in placation. Hyung, you need to. Jeha's fist flew before he could finish the sentence. Taeyong barely dodged, the punch whistling past his jaw close enough to feel the wind of it. Get out, Jeha snarled. Days passed in a blur of alcohol and destruction. Jeha drank more than he slept, which wasn't much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, tear-stained and confused, looking at him like he just killed something precious, which he supposed he had. On the fourth day, he called his assistant, his voice rough from disuse. Give me someone. Anyone. I need to clear my head. An hour later, a beautiful woman arrived at the penthouse. She smiled at him, professional and inviting. Jeha looked at her and felt absolutely nothing. Get out. She blinked, confused. But you called for... I said get out. She fled, heels clicking frantically on the marble. Jeha grabbed the nearest bottle and hurled it at the wall, watching it explode into 1,000 glittering pieces. Just like everything else he touched. The door opened cautiously. Taeyong entered, moving slowly like he was approaching a rabid animal. Hyung, what is happening to you? And suddenly it was all pouring out. Words he'd never said aloud. Truths he'd buried so deep he'd almost believed they weren't real. She makes me feel things I swore I'd never feel again. His voice was raw, stripped of its usual control. Vulnerable. Weak. Human. Taeyong said nothing, just listened. My mother died because my father was vulnerable, Jeha continued, staring at his bleeding knuckles. He loved her too much. Let his guard down. And they killed her to get to him. I watched her die, Taeyong. Watched her bleed out while he held her and cried like a child. He looked up, eyes haunted. I swore I'd never be that weak. Never give anyone that kind of power over me. And then this girl, this innocent, faithful girl, walks into my club, and suddenly I'm breaking every vow I ever made. So you sent her away, Taeyong said quietly. I had to. Jeha's hands were shaking. That night, when she was there under me, begging, I realized I wasn't just taking her innocence. She was taking my control. Every defense I've built, every wall I've constructed, she was tearing them down just by looking at me with those eyes. He laughed, the sound broken. I can't let her destroy me like that. I can't. But God, I can't stop thinking about her. Wanting her. Needing. His voice cracked and he pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to hold back something that felt dangerously like tears. He was breaking, actually breaking, in front of his second in command. The man who'd followed him into countless fights, who'd helped him build an empire from blood and ambition. And now he was seeing Jeha reduced to this. A man terrified of a girl who'd done nothing but offer him everything. I sent her away because I was terrified, Jeha whispered finally. Terrified of how much power she had over me. How much I'd already given her without meaning to. Taeyong was quiet for a long moment. Then and now. Now she's gone. And I'm still terrified. Jeha looked around at the destroyed penthouse, at the evidence of his unraveling. But not of her. Of this. Of what I become without her. After wandering Seoul streets for hours, Mildred found herself standing in front of the church where Uncle Desmond used to preach. Her feet had brought her here without conscious thought. Muscle memory leading her back to the one place that had always felt safe. The heavy wooden doors were unlocked. They always were. Uncle Desmond believed a church should never turn anyone away, no matter the hour. She slipped inside, grateful for the emptiness, for the silence broken only by the settling of old wood and her own ragged breathing. Mildred walked down the center aisle and collapsed into a pew halfway to the altar. And then she cried. Not the desperate, gasping sobs from before, but something deeper. Quieter. The kind of crying that comes from a soul that's finally stopped running and has nowhere left to hide. When the tears finally stopped, she knelt. Her knees found the worn cushion automatically, hands clasping together in a position she'd known since childhood. But the prayers that came weren't the rehearsed ones Uncle Desmond had taught her. They were raw, honest, stripped of all pretense. I don't know who I am anymore, she whispered into the empty church. I thought I did. I thought I was the good girl, the faithful one, the one who did everything right. But maybe that was never really me. Maybe I was just playing a part because it was easier than figuring out the truth. Her voice cracked. Help me find myself again. Or maybe, Help me find myself for the first time. The real me, whoever that is. Exhaustion overtook her before she could say amen. She curled up in the pew, using her arm as a pillow, and fell into a sleep so deep it felt like surrendering. Uncle Desmond arrived at dawn for morning prayer, as he had every day for decades. He saw her immediately, a small figure curled in the pew like a child seeking shelter from a storm. His heart broke and healed in the same instant, grief and relief warring in his chest. He approached quietly, sitting in the pew behind her. For a long moment, he just watched her sleep. This girl he'd raised, this woman he barely recognized. Then he reached out and gently touched her shoulder. Child, he said softly, you came back. Mildred's eyes opened slowly, disoriented. When she saw him, fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Uncle, I'm so sorry. Hush now. He moved to sit beside her, and she collapsed against him like she used to when she was small. I'm sorry too. They talked as the sun rose, really talked, without ultimatums or accusations. She apologized for the lying, for sneaking around, for breaking his heart. He apologized for forcing her to choose, for not seeing how much she was struggling. I thought I lost you to him, Uncle Desmond said, his voice thick with emotion. You almost did. Mildred wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But he didn't want me either. Uncle Desmond held her tighter. They cried together, prayed together, and somewhere in that sacred space between confession and forgiveness, they began to heal. Come home, Mildred, he said finally. Let's heal together. She nodded against his shoulder, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. I'd like that. 1 week later, Mildred had fallen back into routine. She was home, she was safe, and slowly, so slowly, the pieces of herself were starting to fit back together. But they didn't fit the same way they had before. The edges were sharper now, the picture slightly different. She still worked at Club Deluxe because bills didn't stop coming just because your heart got broken. But something fundamental had changed in her. Where before she'd been all shy smiles and nervous energy, now there was steel in her spine. She kept customers at arm's length with a polite, but firm distance that left no room for misinterpretation. No more lingering conversations. No more allowing hands to rest too long on her arm during drink service. She'd survived the worst things she could imagine, giving up everything for someone who threw her away, and the experience had forged something harder inside her. Nothing could touch her now. She wouldn't let it. The other girls noticed, but said nothing. Mildred moved through her shifts like a ghost of her former self, present but unreachable. Jay had been miserable for exactly 7 days, though it felt like 7 years. He'd avoided Club Deluxe, throwing himself into work, into deals, into anything that would keep his mind occupied. But every night when the city went quiet and he was alone with his thoughts, all he could see was her face, tear-stained and confused, looking at him like he'd destroyed something beautiful. On the 8th night, something inside him snapped. He found himself in his car, driving toward the club with no plan beyond seeing her, making sure she was okay. He'd watch from a distance, just confirm she was safe. Then he'd leave. That was the plan. The club was packed, music pounding, bodies pressed together in the semi-darkness. Jaha positioned himself in the VIP section where he could see the floor, but remain relatively hidden. His eyes found Mildred immediately. They always did. Like his soul was attuned to her frequency. She looked different. Harder. She moved through the crowd with mechanical efficiency. A practiced smile that never reached her eyes. Something in his chest twisted painfully. He was so focused on her that he almost missed the drunk customer reaching for her wrist. But then he saw it. Watched the man's fingers wrap around her arm, pulling her closer. Come on, baby, just one dance. Everything went red. Jaha moved without thinking, crossing the floor in seconds. His hand closed around the man's throat and yanked him away from Mildred with enough force to send him stumbling backward. Get your fucking hands off what's mine. His fist connected with the man's jaw before anyone could react. Once, twice, 3 times, he couldn't stop, didn't want to stop. All the rage and frustration and self-hatred of the past week poured into every punch. Security was trying to pull him off, but he fought them too, a man possessed. The music had stopped. The entire club watched in shocked silence as their boss, always so controlled, so calculating, lost his mind over a waitress. Finally, Taeyong and 3 other guards managed to restrain him. The drunk customer was unconscious on the floor, face bloody. Jaeha's chest heaved as he turned to Mildred, still held back by his own men. Are you okay? His voice was raw, desperate. Slap. The sound echoed through the silent club like a gunshot. Mildred's palm connected with his face hard enough to snap his head to the side, hard enough to leave a red handprint on his cheek. How dare you, she said, her voice shaking with fury. The guards released Jaeha, too shocked to maintain their grip. He stood there, stunned, his cheek burning, staring at this woman who just struck him in front of his entire crew. No one had ever dared. No one had ever survived trying. But all he could think was that she was magnificent. Mildred started ranting right there in the middle of the club, her voice cutting through the shocked silence like a blade. Did I tell you I needed saving? Did I ask for your protection? Her chest heaved with fury, with humiliation, with everything she'd been holding back for the past week. You don't get to do this. You don't get to throw me away and then come charging in like some. Jeha moved on instinct. In one fluid motion, he threw her over his shoulder and started walking toward the exit. Put me down. Mildred pounded on his back, kicking, fighting. How dare you, everyone is watching. Let them watch, he said calmly, nodding at Taeyong to handle the unconscious customer as he carried her through the club. The crowd parted like water, nobody brave enough to intervene. He set her down in the alley behind the club, the cool night air a sharp contrast to the heat inside. The door clicked shut behind them, muffling the music to a distant thump. You can lash out at me here, he said, stepping back to give her space. She didn't need the invitation. Her palm connected with his face again. Harder this time, the crack echoing off the brick walls. His head snapped to the side, but he didn't flinch, didn't raise a hand to defend himself. He just stood there and watched her with something that looked dangerously like awe. You made me feel seen, she said, her voice breaking. Special. Wanted. For the first time in my life, someone looked at me like I was more than just the good Christian girl. Like I was a woman with desires and needs, and she choked on the words. And then you treated me like one of your whores. Don't. His voice cut through her rant, sharp and commanding. Don't call yourself that. Why not? She laughed bitterly. That's what I was to you, wasn't it? Another conquest? Another innocent girl to corrupt and discard? No. He stepped closer and she stepped back, her spine hitting the brick wall. You were the opposite. You were. What? Everything. The word came out raw, stripped of all pretense. You were everything. And that terrified me. Mildred stared at him, seeing something in his expression she'd never seen before. Vulnerability. Real. Genuine vulnerability that looked out of place on his dangerous face. My mother died when I was 12, he said, the words coming faster now like a dam breaking. Bled out in my father's arms while I watched. He loved her so much that it made him weak. Let his guard down, and his enemies knew exactly how to hurt him. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture almost violent. I watched him break that night. Watched him cry and beg and fall apart. And I swore I would never let anyone have that kind of power over me. Never be vulnerable. Never love anything enough to be destroyed by losing it. Jeha. But then you walked into my club. His eyes locked on hers. And I forgot every vow I ever made. That first night, I told myself it was just attraction. Just another beautiful woman. But the more time I spent with you, the more I realized you were different. You looked at me like I was human. Not the monster everyone else sees, but just a man. That night, he continued, his voice dropping lower, when you came back. When you were there, under me, begging, I realized I wasn't just taking your innocence. You were taking my control. Every defense I'd built, every wall I constructed, you were tearing them down just by existing. So you pushed me away, she whispered. I couldn't let that happen. Couldn't let you destroy me the way my mother's death destroyed my father. He laughed, the sound bitter. So I pushed you away before you could finish the job. Sent you to another hotel like you were nothing because admitting you were everything was too dangerous. Mildred studied his face, searching for lies and finding only truth. Raw, painful truth. You don't have a right to walk in and out of my life when you please, she said finally. I know. Last time, I chose you and lost everything. I know. This time, she straightened her spine, finding strength in the wreckage of her broken heart. I choose myself. She saw something flicker across his face. Pain. Acceptance. Loss. I understand. I'm building a life, Jeha. A real one. One that doesn't revolve around any man, including you. She moved to walk past him. I've been broken and put back together, and I'm not letting anyone shatter me again. Mildred, wait. Please. She stopped but didn't turn around, couldn't look at him, or she'd lose her resolve. I'm not asking you to give that up. His voice was closer now, just behind her. I'm asking to be part of it. On your terms. I gave you that already, and look what happened. This time it's different. She could hear the desperation bleeding into his voice. It isn't 3 weeks with an expiration date. This time might take forever, but you're worth it. This time I'm the one who's vulnerable. I'm the one begging. Mildred finally turned to look at him and saw something she'd never seen before. Genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of physical harm. She doubted anything could scare him that way. But fear of losing her. fear of watching her walk away, and knowing he destroyed the best thing that ever happened to him. I'll respect your faith, he said quickly, the words tumbling out like he was afraid she'd leave before he could finish. Your boundaries, everything you stand for. I'll attend church with you. I'll do whatever it takes, because losing you is worse than any of it. Why should I believe you? Her voice cracked. You threw me away once. What's to stop you from doing it again when you get scared? Because I've never begged anyone for anything in my life. He took a step closer. Until you. I've broken bones and taken lives without hesitation, but asking you for another chance is the hardest thing I've ever done. Mildred felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. If I do this, if I give you another chance, things will be different. Tell me what you need. I'll give you anything. No more games. No more 3-week arrangements or hotel rooms. If you want me in your life, you get all of me. The church girl and the woman. You don't get to pick and choose which parts you want. I want all of it, he said immediately. All of you. And you have to prove it. She crossed her arms, kneading the barrier between them. Not with money or grand gestures. With time. With patience. With respect for everything I am and everything I believe in. How long? As long as it takes. She met his eyes steadily. I'm not a prize you win, Jeha. I'm a person you earn. And if that's too much work for you, it's not. He reached for her hand carefully, like she might bolt. I'll earn you every day for the rest of my life, if that's what it takes. Mildred looked down at their joined hands and felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. 3 weeks, she said finally. You get 3 weeks to prove you mean what you say. And if you mess it up, I won't. If you mess it up, she continued firmly, I walk away for good. No second chances. No dramatic gestures. We're done. Understood. He squeezed her hand gently. 3 weeks. Starting now. She nodded, not trusting her voice. She was either making the biggest mistake of her life or taking the first step towards something real. The first week was torture for Jeha. Every Sunday, he showed up at Mildred's door in an uncomfortable suit, sitting through church services while Uncle Desmond preached about redemption. The second week brought deeper revelations. Jeha began legitimizing his business and took Mildred to his mother's grave. He cried, actually cried, and Mildred held him while he fell apart. You're not your father, she told him, wiping his tears. And I'm not your mother. We get to write our own story. He kissed her then, soft and gentle, nothing like before. This was a promise. The third week brought the hardest test. Uncle Desmond invited Jeha to dinner, and the tension was suffocating. Finally, Jeha set down his fork and met the older man's eyes. I need to ask for your blessing. To love her as she deserves. Uncle Desmond studied him carefully. She changed you, didn't she? She destroyed me, then rebuilt me into someone better. Uncle Desmond looked at Mildred, finding no doubt in her eyes. Then you have my blessing. But if you hurt her again, God's forgiveness will be easier to obtain than mine. On day 21, Jeha took Mildred back to the penthouse, now transformed with wildflowers and candlelight. He dropped to one knee. I'm still dangerous, still flawed, still figuring out how to be the man you deserve. But I love you, Mildred Okafor. Will you marry me? Through happy tears, she said yes. 6 months later, they married in Uncle Desmond's church, her world mixing with his. Jeha looked uncomfortable in his suit, but never took his eyes off his bride. When asked if he'd honor and cherish her, he said, I do, without hesitation. He legitimized his business and respected her faith. In private, she remained his fallen angel, their passion now wrapped in love and commitment. Uncle Desmond came to dinner weekly. I still don't like how you two began, but I can't deny that you love her. Every Sunday, Jeha promised. I'll keep taking her to church every Sunday. One evening, as Mildred wore her fallen angel necklace, Jeha traced it with his finger. My fallen angel. Technically, you're the one who fell. I just caught you. He kissed her deeply. Then we fell together. They had both fallen from grace, from control, from everything they thought they knew. But in falling, they'd found each other. Found a love that was messy and complicated and real. And somehow that was enough. That's it, loves. Mildred and Jeha's journey from corruption to redemption, from broken to whole. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Did Jeha's transformation feel earned? Should Mildred have chosen differently? Smash that subscribe button for more stories that'll have you feeling all the feels. Until next time, stay wild, stay passionate, and remember, sometimes the people who break us are the same ones who make us whole. Peace out. Sparkles.